Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Now, we've got another strange take on the gender reform bill. Many people are saying that it is something that should be dropped, many of the opposition, obviously. But when you get a party that aligns itself with the same issues as the SNP, calling for it to be dropped, then you know that most people in Scotland are definitely going to be against it. Because this, of course, is Alba saying it should be dropped. Alex Salmond's party say, for heaven's sake, just don't carry on with it. It's a waste of time, effort and money that won't achieve anything and will go against the majority of people in Scotland. And, of course, they're right. So we're going to take a look at this, but unusually, and we don't normally do them, but occasionally we do. This story is in Pravda, or The National, as they like to call themselves. The in-house paper for the mentally ill. But the story's there. But the strange thing is, the story isn't anywhere else. And I'm presuming it's because the rest of the mainstream media don't consider Alba to be important enough to warrant actually reporting anything of what they say. Oh dear, Alex, you really have become a non-entity. But we'll take a look at this very quickly, just to see what their take is on it. But we already know. But there's a possibility of why, but I'll come to that in the main body. Here goes. Yes, so here we go. So MSP to call for end of legal action over Scotland's gender reform bill. And note it says MSP singular because, of course, Alba only have but one MSP, and there she is, Ash Regan. You know, not the brightest bunny, but on this particular occasion... She's absolutely right. She's on the side of angels on this one. So we will let her off the hook today at least. Wait until she says the next stupid thing. Be straight back on. But hey, you know, fight one battle at a time, don't we? Anyway, the Alba Party will lodge a parliamentary motion urging the Scottish Government to halt legal action over the Gender Recognition Reform Bill. Just going to move that across slightly because it's more central. There we go. And of course they have to. Otherwise they're throwing good money after bad. They'll be alienating the vast number of people in Scotland because they just don't want this bill. And they're doing what? They're trying to achieve what? There's nothing there. They think, oh, if we do this, we'll keep the Greens on board. The Greens aren't going anywhere. They are too comfortable where they are, snug and cosseted with their ministerial salaries. They'll stay where they are, thank you very much. Ash Regan, the party's only MSP, will request ministers scrap any plans to roll out the bill after the Court of Session ruled that the UK government could lawfully block the legislation. That was delivered on Thursday, I believe it was. And it was, or Friday morning. And it was a very welcome piece of news, I'm sure, for 99% of people in Scotland because it's just the sensible thing. Anyway, the GRR Bill was passed by 2/3 of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament in December 2022, but was subsequently stopped from becoming law after the Scottish Secretary, Alistair Jack, made the unprecedented decision to use the Section 35 order. It does now mean that next time he uses it, it isn't, of course, unprecedented, and so they won't be able to use that particular description of it. Jack raised concerns that the reforms could adversely affect on UK equality law. And as the powers to legislate over gender reforms are devolved to Scotland, the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Government took the UK Government to court over its decision, leading to a 2-day showdown in the Court of Session in September. Now, the worrying thing, of course, is it was Lady Haldane who has form on being sort of pro-trans in the past. So at least she came out this time and gave a legal verdict based on law, not on her biased opinion. I'm not saying she's terribly biased in everything. I'm just saying that there's a potential of bias given her previous on it. Lady Haldane gave her official ruling on the case last Friday and said UK ministers did have the right to block the reforms. You see, and that was the thing. It's not whether she felt that the reforms were right or not, of course. It was simply the legality of the UK government's position. And since all parties agreed to it prior to the Scottish Parliament being set up, then of course it was legal. Now, if Humza Yousaf goes to the Supreme Court, it will also find that it was legal because that is the law. And also, you need to see what the legal advice given prior to this court case was. And if you were unlikely to win, then that is a serious misuse of public money. Anyway, Regan, who resigned from the government in opposition to the bill last year, insisted ministers will lose the support of the country if they keep pursuing the policy. She said, I had previously warned the Scottish Government that they were attempting to face down Westminster on an issue that they would lose. Now, I'm just going to take a step aside here, and apart from Ash Regan's personal opinion, where, like I say, she resigned the role, and I think, amazingly, someone actually having the courage of their convictions within the SNP is such a rare thing, and for that I do admire on that one. But I think that there is more to this just than that. I think it's also that Alba must, as a party, for the want of a better word, as a group, have decided that they will not be pro this act. And I think the reason is that they know it's incredibly unpopular all across the country. And if they want to push for independence, which they do, obviously it's their raison d'etre, they want to push for independence. The one thing they cannot afford to do is alienate the vast proportion of people in Scotland for other trivial matters as far as getting independence is concerned. Why 99%? Why go against what 99% of the country are going to say? Alienate your party by them, and then hope to win, on a different matter later down the road, having already stripped people away from your party over a very controversial issue. Anyone with any kind of political nous would have realised this a long time ago. But of course, political nous and Humza Yousaf do not belong in the same sentence. The guy's a moron, isn't he? Anyway, she said, I've previously warned, like I say, that they would lose. She said, many high-profile incidents have now shown us that gender recognition reforms, as proposed, are not fit for purpose. Hundreds of thousands of pounds have already been wasted on it, and it would be unimaginable for the Scottish Government to appeal this decision and then ultimately proceed to the situation of potentially asking the UK Supreme Court to overturn a decision of Scotland's highest court, which I have mentioned in previous videos. It seems a very odd way of pushing for your own independence if you're asking for, in what your eyes is a foreign court, to overturn your own highest court. It's almost as though saying you don't like having your own independent court because of the decisions it makes. This, of course, is why the SNP are so desperate through its legal reforms to control the legal profession. Imagine Lady Haldane sitting there knowing that if she gave the decision that she did give in an independent Scotland, she would be fired. Because that's what those proposals, that's what this move within the legal profession, by controlling the legal profession, leads to. And that's why everyone in the legal profession in Scotland is against it. But let's face it, they control the police and they control Dorothy McBain. And if they can get to the point where they hire and fire judges based on performance, in other words, if a judge votes and gives a decision against the government, they're fired. What do you end up with? It's a dictatorship, isn't it? She says, I urge Humza Yousaf now to completely scrap his government's gender reforms. And of course, he won't. Well, he may. I'll be honest and say he may. There is a possibility, because not that it's his decision, but I think other senior people in the party will urge him to do this. Because they'll explain to him that the Greens aren't going to walk away. Simple as that. The legislation, which was passed by a cross-party majority at Holyrood, would make it easier for people to change their legally recognised sex, although not their actual sex, which is impossible to change. Born male, live male, die male, and that's it. It would remove the need for trans people to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria by a doctor before they're allowed to change their legally recognised sex in Scotland. So, for example, if you wanted to dress as a woman to encourage children near you so you can abuse them, that would become so much easier in Scotland. You wonder why they'd not thought of this before. The SNP, we all know what the P stands for. And so if they can do that, they can all sort of chat. Today I'll be male, tomorrow I'll be female, because I'm going out predating on children. So, that's what they want. The Alba motion, which MSPs will be able to sign, will read that this Parliament notes the outcome of the Court of Session's decision to the Secretary of State for Scotland's use of the provision of set out in Section 35, blah, 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 load of old rubbish, we don't care. It's not going to happen. Nobody listened to Alba, which is why I've had to find this story in the National, the only rag that will carry such a poor tale of such a tiny, tiny party. But I will give her this. On this issue, she is right. Coming up. Now, of course, any sensible person would tell you that the GRR is dead. It cannot win. It cannot possibly pass. And even if he goes to the Supreme Court, he's not arguing the case. In his mind, he thinks he's arguing this case. But he's not. He's actually arguing against what is actually written law. He cannot possibly win. But he might. He might have to. Well, not win, but he might have to fight because he hasn't got the balls to face down the Greens. Sad little man. And what's even worse is, of course, this isn't even an issue with which he believes. If you remember, he had to make excuses and pretend to go for a meeting elsewhere. Oh, look, I accidentally forgot that there was this really important vote. Let me be elsewhere. Because he couldn't go for it. Otherwise, the guys down the mosque could be having a word with him. And he couldn't vote against it because he'd be voting against his own parliament, his own party. So he pretended to be elsewhere at the time, hiding in a broom cupboard somewhere. Maybe with someone. Who knows? I wonder who he could have been with. No end to the selection, really, is it? Certainly wasn't the Saturday Girl then, but it could have been Annam. Who knows? Anyway, of course, the irony is that somebody else didn't vote either. Didn't vote for it, didn't vote against it. She actually extended her maternity leave to make sure that she was off school that day. And, of course, that was wee Kate Forbes. Rather than voting against it, which was her own party she'd have voted against, she declined to vote at all again. But again, she's against it. So it's funny how you got these two people. They seem to be at loggerheads and fighting each other, but they both agree that this is not something they want to vote for. What it is to be the leader of a failing party. I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video, and I will speak to you later. Goodbye.